Okay, here we are back with chapter 16, the last chapter in the course. And again, it's a little bit of a review of things we've talked about before marketing, in marketing one, in terms of the consumer research process. It's a little bit more in depth, but it's a good review and important to understand because you need to all of these things to kind of tie in together. In order to understand consumer behavior, you have to have good research methods and methodologies and a plan and understand the basic term. So here we go. So here's the basic consumer research process. Again, you've seen this before. You saw it in uh, in marketing one. We're going to go through developing objectives. What is the objective of your research, and what's the purpose of your research, and then coming up with data. We're going to talk about all those different types of data that you can go in different ways you can get information. So again, okay, so we'll just jump right in here. So there's qualitative and quantitative research. You can have a couple different purposes of the research. New ideas for products or promotional themes would be qualitative research. Count the number of consumers would be quantitative research. And sometimes qualitative research takes place before quantitative research. And it helps to define what objectives are. It's the qualitative research is understanding what it is that you're trying to find. Okay, so just put yourself in a position. Let's say you're opening up a business and you're opening up a pizza restaurant near campus, and you're trying what would you be interested in? What would some of your objectives be? Or you're opening up a skateboard place or store or whatever it would be. So what do you want to know about from people, and how are you going to go out and gather the data? So this whole idea of secondary data. Secondary data is data that exists that was originally gathered for research purpose other than the present research. And there are all sorts of different places to get that. There's internal secondary data that could come from, sales records or other research you've done. And then that's internal secondary data that's within the company itself. Then external data usually comes from government sources, to periodicals, market research, consumer panels. So it's things that you would get from outside of your business. Okay, secondary data. There's advantages and disadvantages to it. It could be a very cost-effective way to get information. It helps you sort of redefine what's going on, what you're looking for. Maybe you can see some trends, that kind of thing. And then it is also much less expensive. Limitations is that because it's focused on something else, it might not necessarily answer some of the questions you're looking for, and it might not be accurate either because of time or the way it was gathered, and also it also could be out of date. So qualitative research. The idea of qualitative research rejects the ideas that consumers are rational decision makers. We saw that a little bit. We saw there's one thing that people say and there's another thing that people do, and we might not necessarily have all the information, that kind of thing. So motivational researchers suggested that consumers were not always consciously aware of why they made the decisions when they did, and even when they were aware of their basic motivations, they're not always willing to reveal the reasons to others or even to themselves. So qualitative research also sometimes at small sample sizes can you can't necessarily generalize it to the population, and qualitative research is good for the idea of initial work, but maybe not necessarily always good for the full project. And you can use it in conjunction with quantitative. So there's a couple different methods. One are interviews with individuals, and individual interviews with people. Another method is this idea of focus groups. You usually have 8 to 10 participants. You make sure that who's ever in the focus group are actually eligible to be there. Maybe that they actually use the product, and it could fall into categories of product awareness or whatever. Or also maybe if you work for a certain company, they don't want you there. Maybe if you're already a customer, they don't want you involved in it. So anyway, it lasts usually a couple hours. There's usually two-way mirrors, oftentimes two-way mirrors. There's usually a facilitator. It's taped, that kind of thing. But you want to make sure whoever the facilitator is has good questions. So you want to make sure that you have good probing questions. So tell me more about that. Give me an example. How does it differ from your other experience? That kind of thing. So just an idea. You have to, how you phrase the questions and ask the questions is very important. There's also included usually a discussion guide. It's a step-by-step outline that sets out the line of questioning the researcher needs to cover, within people in depth, and what's the actual focus that you're looking for. Okay, so again, this is a nice little chart that people. That's in the book with some ideas that some people might use, during the qualitative research process. You can review that. Okay, now let's talk about quantitative research. Quantitative research, marketers use it to understand the acceptance of various products or specific brands, as well as the impact of promotional messages on consumers. So in other cases, objectives are to assist marketers in pinpointing consumers' level of satisfaction with a product, service, or distributor, or retailer, or possibly attempt to identify areas in which the consumer has unmet needs, or even to attempt to better predict future consumer needs or behavior. Quantitative research is a broad category, and it includes experimentation, survey techniques, observation. Findings are usually descriptive and empirical, which is based on this idea of based on experience. And if it's collected using appropriate sampling, can be generalized to a larger population. So what are some different methodologies for quantitative research? Observation, just watching people in their natural habitat. Mechanical observation might be counts and records consumer behavior. So electronic traffic counters, tape technology, meters, that kind of thing. Use of frequent shopper cards, that kind of stuff. And then there's also physiological observation that monitor respondents' patterns of information processing. For example, an electronic eye camera that may be used to monitor the eye movements of subjects looking at a series of advertisements for various products, and electronic sensors placed on the subjects' heads, which we've seen on the neuromarketing, can monitor their brain activity and attentiveness levels involved in viewing the advertisements. So that's observation. There's also experiments. Identify cause and effect relationships among factors. For instance, it's possible to test the relative sales appeal of many types of variables, such as package designs, alternative price points, or different promotional offers by experiments designed to identify cause and effect. And in the simplest form, such experiments, only one variable is manipulated, called the independent variable, while all the other elements are kept constant. There's also test marketing, in terms of seeing, putting a product out in the market to see how people respond to it, if they buy it or they don't buy it. And then finally, lab experiments, which are completely controlled environments. All right, and then quantitative research also surveys. They can be done in a variety of different ways. Talking to people in malls or in shopping areas, calling people on the phone, mail surveys, email surveys, internet surveys, all that kind of thing. Okay, so there are advantages and disadvantages to each of these different types. You can look at look at them. Look at this chart also from the book, looking at the cost, the speed, response rate, interviewer bias, that kind of thing. So these are all things that we're concerned about, that you have to, when you're designing something, when marketers are designing something, they're interested in looking at. Okay, now we have data collection. You want to make sure it's valid and reliable. And you also want to make the difference between open-ended and closed questions. Open-ended question and closed-ended questions. That and each has their place. So an open-ended question requires answers in the respondent's own words, almost like an essay question. And the closed-ended questions require respondents to check an appropriate answer from a list of options, like multiple choice or true or false. And it's said to have a validity if it does in fact collect appropriate data needed to answer the questions or objectives stated in the first stage of the research process. And study is also said to be reliable if the same questions asked of a smaller sample produce the same findings of a larger sample. Okay, readership and attitudes. So there's this idea of magazine readership survey, and those surveys are conducted to provide the publisher, editors, and circulation directors with reader feedback, as well as to provide the marketing and sales staff with information that would enable them to create a more convincing marketing package for selling advertising pages to potential advertisers and their advertising agencies. And in particular, a standard use of the data secured from magazine readership surveys is preparation of a profile of the publication's readers so that potential advertisers can determine whether the publication delivers the audience that is most likely to respond positively to their advertising. So there are a couple of different ways that they go about that. The Likert scale, its attitude scale is easy because it tends to interpret, and it's easy to prepare and to interpret, and it's simple for consumers to answer. The Likert scale is this idea of agree or disagree. Semantic differential scales are relatively easy to construct and administer. They consist of a series of opposite adjectives such as good, bad, hot, cold, like, dislike, that kind of thing. And it's on a continuum. And behavior intention scale measures the likelihood that a consumer will act in a certain way in the future, such as buying the product again or recommending it to a friend. And rank order scales, in that subjects are asked to rank items such as products or retail stores or websites in order of preference in terms of some criterion such as overall quality or value for money. Okay, so here we are. We're interested in customer satisfaction, right? Customer satisfaction surveys basically ask people how happy they are after they actually buy the product. Mystery shoppers are professional observers who pose as customers and interact with and provide unbiased evaluations of the company's service personnel in order to identify opportunities for improving productivity and efficiency. And then complaint analysis essentially encourages customers to complain about an unsatisfactory product or service and provide suggestions for improvement by completing forms to ask specific questions beyond the routine, how was everything? Okay, so let's take a look at sampling. A sample is a subset of the population that's used to estimate the characteristics of the entire population. If any of you have taken statistics, you know a little bit about this. So you want to have the probability sample and the non-probability sample. Again, this is all very statistics-based and very important with determining whether or not how accurate your result is going to be. Okay, now ultimately we want to combine qualitative and quantitative research. So you might do focus groups and individual interviews, also with asking people more numeric based questions, and from those, using those two different types and methodologies, then you can come to a conclusion. All right, so finally, just talk about what it's going to look like. What will a research report look like? You can have an executive summary, which summarizes what you've learned in a short, easy to read format. The recommendation for what people should do, what the marketer should do, what the description, what the methodology was that you went about, and then tables and graphs that confirm and support what your findings. All right, so that's it. That's the class. I hope that you learned some things this semester, and I hope you enjoyed it. I hope, if nothing else, you are going to become, if you're not going into marketing, that you, at least some of these things have helped you to become a better consumer, and also listen to the news and interpret the news and analyze the news around you a little bit more in depth. Okay, thanks everybody, and thanks for your attention, and if you need anything, be in touch.